Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. So my name is Janet Gyatso, and I'm a professor here of Buddhist Studies at Harvard. And we're very happy to have the honor of having Khenpo Sodargye speak here tonight. This is actually the second time that he visited Harvard. He was already here in 2013, I believe. We just figured out it's been 4 years, and it's really wonderful to see him again. He was born in Kham in 1962, and he was ordained as a monk in 1985, so that means at the age of 23. And he was a student and at the monastery where he is at today, which is either called Serta or Larungar, which is an enormous, amazing monastery. It's a new monastery that was established by Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok, who was an amazing teacher. He's now unfortunately passed away, but he established this very, very large monastery. Actually, I don't have the date when that was established, but I think it was something like the 1970s. Oh, 1980s. Oh, we have some experts here. So it's not a traditional, it hasn't been there for a very long time, but it became extremely popular and still is today. And it's also especially amazing for the very large number of women who are there, nuns. So both monks and nuns are studying there. They have a very rigorous academic program. And the monastery provides a lot of leadership for the lay people and leading certain movements in especially things that I'm especially impressed with, having to do with care of animals and also trying to discourage Tibetans from wearing a lot of animal skins and doing things of that sort, in addition to the explicitly Dharma teachings. So Khenpo Sodargye is extremely knowledgeable in Buddhist philosophy, and he has studied and published books on all kinds of topics in Buddhist philosophy, in Buddhist monasticism, in Buddhist logic, and in Buddhist Tantra. And he has several books in English, and he has a very, very large number of followers who are Chinese speakers, both inside China and in other parts of the world. So it's a great honor to have him tonight, and so we look forward very much to his teachings. And they will be translated by Mr. Tenzin Gelek, who is an expert translator who works at a Trace Foundation in New York City. So thank you. Well,
저거 실던 거 달로 longo 하퍼 야 뭐라 어야 다은데 달론디 챗인데 저거 실던 걸로 아마 잡지 조이다는 전인디 longo가 또 차트도 시기가 차즈 고추 팀장연지 레산은 있나요 닝원이야 저 시로와스라 용지 마송에도 다 달로 로스토크더니 제남바 고추 손총공원이 잡주신노때 지 저다진도 달론저 마숑리 대인나다가 다 적직되는 달론저 된잖아 다 롬지가 되는데 아마다 냠도 들어라 시지가 다 디가든 양송들이 되라 도망인데 사실 용어수시
Initially, we had a discussion about doing this talk at the earlier part of the year. Last year, we were planning the series of the lecture, but unfortunately, because I couldn't leave on time from China, and therefore we were not able to keep the schedule as planned at the beginning of the year. But then I'm happy that the organizers done so much work and put together this beautiful events this time in November. So I wanted to apologize initially to the organizers for not being able to deliver this talk at the beginning of the year as we promised.
Tani da nisong parchir chaksamlo tari gilgin chimo jili janso kongo songwan zhundra tani nga din sama yung suyong nyongzhe togong wit kamna togo ngi da gilgin ga chatrat tamak sinyan yin.
In 2013, I came to United States and I actually came to Harvard. At that time, I was so fortunate to participate in a lecture by Professor Janet Gyatso.
Tiskamnangi download dana tani mtsendiranga tani Harvard lopchung tani ta lomo loma shiji somar dana chatso niga dar loma shiji korku sona yobore sam stemde dugni.
Although I wasn't able to be a kind of long-term student, but I'm so lucky to be a student of Harvard for 2 hours, and I always cherish that moment.
Yena ngai ti slopchat tarong saro changanda tani gilgin chimukung go zo de logon pamnam jongne namtar kana kum khanro ishi sorgir ka tani stojute songando ti nana musur ga tarim khanro ishi sorgir de ngama ta woyer ka tani ji keba jan da tarigam chade na mandu jin da na ga ta ligam jeran jog tu sonare ta timu galang jis ga tari kong mara tani yinji gi tang mara tani ta parchir loma tari jib jor nga ga ka tinanga tani chat ta na so.
I remember vividly about the talk. Professor Janet Gyatso gave a talk on the life of Khandro Yeshe Tsoge through the life circle of Guru Rinpoche's Namtar Dorje. And Professor Janet Gyatso mentioned that the Khandro Yeshe Tsoge had to do many things against her wish.
This kapna tani ta loma jamba tsogtela jivdarshi tani jivdarshi ne na loma sikasena ta ko kama parwo ir ka sachani yang pomez ga tenja ya ne tsrshongwa ko sonze.
And then after the lecture, there was discussion, and different students were providing the input and feedback. One of the students said, I heard a similar story about a woman in Nepal.
Yang loma sikasena tani ta ngama tani Ameriki shone yang tari pomez ga tenja ne tsrshongwa tani sem hale ba tari kyoni na ta jima tari ko na ga sem kham la ya nya jing du se.
Another student said, I heard a similar story about an American woman in the United States, and because of that, she was really kind of moved and sad to hear on and on about the plight of a woman.
Ta jima tani khong namba ga ta pansan rolang iti rolang gam jingje de cherezena ta ti kasum khandro yishin sorjir ke na ta tare chirjanda manja ba ga ta legon gar mambep timo zu shong yo re da yenna yang semla tari ga 사지 저라 첨보시에 등물금 소나가 말홍에 되네 지 그런 거 광을 깨드니나 다 다른 되네 멈터네 그거 다 나추수에 기다는 멈터네 소아케지올라 그거 가칭강 마쇼노도 다 워일 그거 매 묵서잔들에지 다 코난 비즘직 된다 시고요.
And then they had a conclusion, and people agreed in that discussion. Although Khandro Yeshe Tsoge faced many challenges and problems, but it didn't overwhelm her. But in fact, all the challenges that she had gone through did not stop her from really continuing her studies, her Dharma practices. And she was able to overcome these really tremendous hardship, and it didn't left her kind of long-term sad impact. And so Professor Janet Gyatso concluded that we can take from this experience that regardless of all the hardship that the Khandro Yeshe Tsoge went through, but she was able to transform this and able to kind of inspire, in some ways, many others to continue their practices.
Kapti ngala tari tsorna ta nga 마섹시가 슬롭티시 저도 니어 마토 다 디츠 통통들 디랑다 tani ngala taga pandre chimbo ni shunga chigda chirezena ta nga ma tari kharshugni tani chig masyaksiga girgan zui tani chuchut mambo share re tani taga girgan dar somaniga tani ta chukzu urur chikastan ga dati nam nyam da testavi dholang shi ju tani chig koshkute tangwon shung sunga tene na nge jima taga ta lowlang har songni tani ta chi nga tsu sachana yang chig ta nangtang ga tani lojong shen tang ga tani chig jimjig bada na loma timoyo nare ta tetsola ti tari xar ka chur to tena jima nga tsu tari ta lojong shelig da yang na gergen khona ga chitsud mamboz ga sha tena tenda jiksa mare tani ta khabar locheng ga tani gergen da loma chegi gergen ge titso nyonyo ga songwe da na tani tari loma so yang pansan tari rolang she na ha leba tari sema da pamba tokum rewe yopo tokgozi da na tani har songwe 당이 다리 디프트도
And I had a really deep impact from participating in this discussion. And I can sum up kind of the two major impact I had from participating in Professor Janikyazu's talk and a discussion. First of all, what really kind of most touched me was that I have been teacher. I've been teaching for many years. But at this kind of Janikyazu's discussion, that I'm amazed about this kind of level of the discussion between the professor and the student, between the professors, kind of the free atmosphere, where, unlike in Tibetan setting, the teachers and the student have this equal, if you like, opportunity and the equal treatment in terms of exchanging views. And the teacher doesn't seem like preoccupying the entire discussion, but giving kind of many rooms for the student to come forward and share their view. And this really left me a great impact. And as a result, when I went back, I talked to my colleagues and students saying, in Harvard, they have this amazing approach in doing research and studying, and we really need to follow that. The teacher kind of occupy or preoccupy less time, and they encourage the student to come up with the discussions and the ideas. So we try to adopt that from that lecture at our center there.
Tani shokchigi yana ngasu boyeri yana draga tani chigi ta sachak jambari gatoga ta lama dana tani chigi ngungum khiba tsur namthar trezi ta namthar tela tongchong rato shekana yana yang tela dari jimjik sheni yana tani ta chigi lojung ka rantang chenpo ziyo no nga dari tani kostok sarwa zi nyesong.
And the other impact I had was when we traditionally studying biographies of different lamas, we really do not pay that much of attention. But from your teaching style and approach to the discussion, I realized, studying biography is really important. It has many aspects in it if we do it properly, and that kind of gave me that new idea how we should approach studying biographies.
Ta terang zo jiga semkham ga tangda tani jiga nga zu ojin na tang ga jimji kor ko tani ta namba sola tani ji skacha nyong zi jin.
So today our topic or the subject is about how we really deal with the challenges in modern time.
Ta thumar khatang terang ga tirat omukser jan ga song yore sherdang atong ruwa mi lorji ga sang shalna tani tarnga yana lo tongchang mo jig da jing chowa ga chagje amamu da de jin de jing ruwa mi sartut de yang ji de zamzi mo me je de dang jawa ga ji chanri ga lakser de yang de zamzi da rim thumbo mayin je tani nga so de mudang mi war ka to gam rera de yang tam zip tin ra me ni na rang rang su su ngo ga chwa chi ni na lo tong chong mong bo zu song yo re.
And this century is a very unique century because if we look back over 1,000 years of human history, or in terms of our living standard in the past is much lower, and the innovations and all this creation or the creativities not as much as we experience these days. Besides, the scientific discovery is not as good as now, and as well as the kind of communications among and within the kind of human society is not as close as we used to, as we have now.
다 로프처럼 가지 되는 잠오는 거 땅나 여러 아르자 침부즈 용네 가수 민 소아 계땅다나 대진다나 로종 시땅다나 다 현가 드니 지 연등근 소아티 잔다 만자가 근결화 침부즈 용네는 드니 미 샘컴 되라요 중원당 만자가 그지다 지 라라라 다리 직적다나 라라라 지 동처리가 나타나 드니 라라라 지 rāngla yichi māyō pāgane na tāchī rādāng māngāng nēsir mōng chīgayōn rē.
And then if we look at the past few decades, we experienced this amazing transformation, the great change because of the scientific discovery and because of the change in education and so on. We experienced this kind of most rapid social change. We're all going through that. As a result, the change also impact at education level, how people live their kind of regular life. The change also creates many opportunities, at the same time many challenges too. These changes bring fear, doubt, and people's kind of questioning people's basic confidence due to this really rapid change. And this is what we go through now.
ngaran ngoni na atane ta lo chongchong parchir lo ni stasam yarmaz ka rapt shongwe tane ji ta gomba ga na ne to so girgan shi dan chacha shi ne to ga masir ga nang ga chowa de yang de sam ga nyam nyong yo ma re re ta no ta lo cha shi zi ne nge yang ji sa cha so so dan mo mong bo ga ting ji jong di nga su mer nam ga to ga sem kham ga ta ji dingmer zi ji to tani khasho ina da no sho ina da da dong mo da mo da ta nin zhe de ge ji ji ma dian ji ge de da ji xin de zheng ge de zhen de ne nga su can ge le se de na ta ji ka song de na di de jiang gang dang yang ma da ge ge ne pe jie yuan zhe da yin na yang xi tani can ge da le se ge to ce da ne neng ge sem kem ge ye ra ni ga do men ni me 당수 직전도 직전 목소리라도 쳐야 삼지고 그 다당요.
I have been a monk since I was 23. I spent most of my life in a monastery, studying and teaching. So I really had a limited exposure in terms of ordinary life. But at the same time, in the past few years, I had opportunity to visit many people, had close communication with the kind of communities. And when I meet many people and talking to them, I realized that the change I just mentioned about the educational change, the scientific change, and so on, including this rapid economic development, of course it brings more opportunities and improvement at a certain level. At the same time, it also brings same amount of anxieties and stress and so on. And this is, I think, experiencing both in the East as well as in the West. There are, kind of common challenges between the Eastern and the Western world. Some of the kind of challenges are very unique to Pacific regions.
단 더스타리 소학 목소리가 그는데 단 인문이 상랑당나 원내가 저 샘큼 그 추, 다 제대가 그러나 가선대나 되네 상동 공진도 소인난 자가 대 마연바가 되네 지 생각도 이제 되네 생각나나 대라 니바트모 마연바지요 되네 지다 동반이 그 싸와 저기 되네 나추가 나나 된자야 요지 다 때가 때다리 나춘데 로종시 마음용에 있는 랑랑소수 샘데 간제인 샘그 모델라 사로도 되는 있나 되는 직전 감그 등을 모아서도 랑식그 다리 진조주 다 디모가 다리 zor나요.
I actually feel that if we really need to approach to our inner peace, if we need to really understand and improve the quality of our spiritual life, there are many ways we can do that. We're going through meditation, practicing Tibetan or practicing Tantra, meditation on emptiness. There are many Buddhist approaches in terms of how to reduce stress and deal with challenges. And I feel that using these kind of techniques and studying the nature of the mind would be very useful in terms of really overcoming these fears and so on.
So, 샤르쇼코 그러나 곰바 속는 거 때문에 지금 양렘바 단도 소인나 시응무부 다때 환절다 된다가 지금 할레바가 차진 여보요 말했다. 옛날에 샘큼 그 제된데 지금 잔다 만들어서 명고연데. 때 명조원도 지금 통충 명절 원숨 거 잡아지대. 때나 다 대란더니 길근다는 소마스이나 지마 그 카쇼코 다지 때네 곰바이나 자가 추바이나 자가 냥렘바 탐치보고 능그 셈거 때네 지 체성도做了 로종다 점직시나 할레베 야보레.
In Asia, in eastern regions, you see many monasteries, the Dharma practitioners. A lot of these have this amazing amount of the peace, inner peace. At the same time, you see them in terms of a material development. They're not that great. But when you approach them, they really do possess kind of a genuine inner peace. And especially for the practitioners going through many years of practices, you can obviously see them, you can almost like observe them, how they live peacefully and harmoniously. And I think it would be very useful for you really to investigate how these Eastern practitioners maintain really calm mind in kind of very turmoil situation. And it would be very useful for you to really investigate how do they do that. By doing so, you really have to do research in Tibetan Buddhism. You have to research in terms of how they cultivate this kind of attitude, which really enables them to maintain calm and so on. So for you, it would be really useful to go there and investigate and study.
실능아 숨머난 거 소화돼 가성되는 거 뭐멍보지 기세고인데 다 예열래 우가타바들 고거 예열래 우가타바들 고거잖아 다 다른가 야나 가수 베나 아메리카는 진짜 요네메시 왜나 뭔가리도 자칸이나 자칸 찍어 나왔어 그 인던 그 자칸 때 맞도 자칸 장가 나왔어나 때 자마자무무게 근데 자칸 때 나왔어나 그런 거 초마대 야나 인던 거 초만데 맞도 때문에 초마점바 자무무 근데 지금 쪽보가 까차샤나 쪽보대요 지금 녀치다니 맞도 때문에 녀잠바 탄치다 특문도는 다 런건 코리다 땅크리다 런건 코리 코나 맞도 때문에 잔나다리 덴지다리 다 미안도这个龙树学就华灯面的地方蒙不这个有关的但现在呀他当上人呢等俺做人个上来呀了就娘都接的呢等你就人个哪个可以的嘞人个可以的了这个盘生大就娘娘人家的盘生的了路上学的等你人个错的对了也特别是真的我呢就深刻个他的다 여러 지금 니바톤 찍고 터모 마음이 탑스르도 연거든.
So I feel one way of really overcoming these challenges in terms of the fear and so on, you really need to get out of your comfort zone. I've noticed and observed many people like to use the same thing, like going to the same restaurant, eating and ordering the same dish, meeting the same people, playing around with the same idea. But if, things are changing, and if we wanted to cultivate the level of, like a calm and overcome challenges to face change, what we need to do is we first need to get out of our comfort zone and really kind of experiment things, new things, new life way, and this will really be a good source of testing your mental capacity. And this will really put yourself at a challenge. And this, I think, in the long term, would help you to really deal with the changes and the challenges.
Shirdan, da ngusu, tani nafshuk rini da, tani sharshuk, tangi nafshuk da sharshuk zujana yang yan chinru sari. Da yana yang the sharshuk na da ji yayar da na boyer la soba ga ta sacha mongbo ji ke rini de dona. Tani nafshuk America da na tani yinji la soba ga sacha mongbo ga tani 초학을 야정단 초학을 깼다 뭐가 더니 비와던 등급 받지가 시긴 살에 더 옛날에 이 뭐가 가르칠 거로 다 지금 르니는 조스당데라 난사다고 그 차버서 요까
When I observe the differences between East and the West, maybe I will say difference between Chinese, Tibetan, or the American and UK and so on. Generally speaking, I think I feel that we all almost like experience the same thing. We all desire for happiness. We all try to avoid suffering. There isn't that kind of great differences in terms of what we want. But the differences I think I observed is mainly in a kind of cultural background. The way we approach to things, is differ because of our gap in cultural background.
당선 그 르니데라 nga tasir 가려 되나 다 샤쇼 거 르니데 이거 지 파르치르다 야라 지 드바 소우시지 되네 지금 나쇼 거 르니데 망보즈 거네나 다 가바 소 체레데나 다 당선 nga 보여리 난다 야여리 난다 소마 망보즈도 나쇼 거 소자 소소나 송데 되네 그런 다 바라 참능알로가 저런데 되네 지 상마도 따라 유면인 거 무면인 거지 다 가바코나 송에다는 지 그지 시가지 다 전다 만자반들 진짜 따라 쳐요네.
One of the differences in terms of culture I observed was in East, people just like to be obedient. They wanted to follow and they do not want to lead, if you like. Whereas in the West, there's this very strong culture of critical thinking, and sometimes a little bit overcritical, how they, like see things. I observed Eastern students going to the West to study. When they come back, they become critical of everything. That's my one of the observations.
tani chokbong gare dan phamang gare na tani rang puchuk de ta nabsho ga lojong am ngap sam gon de nabsho ko lojong de shok kan thad ne na ha le ba gan thi changwa da na phusum sok ba yen gon de yena ya ta te lojong wa song de jima dari ta ji ge na phamala dari sap kari na ja gergen la sap kari na ran ja 대전 등 아주 소리진 르니가 타다 정말다 할래바 다리 직접 어떤데 뭐베 리화 제화들에 되는 납쇼가 로종소나 다 지마다리 아주 곰바다 아주 소리진 거다 르니인데라 다리 갑바 침부 땅내다 땅 아주라 깔리 커보 용거래 제이다나 다 뭐뭐지가 똑바요 건데.
And because of that, I know many parents are now starting to really express concern in terms of sending their children to the West. In the past, it's like everyone's dream in Asia to send their children to a higher education institute in the West. So now, when they observe, when the kids coming back to the East, they become very critical about traditional lifestyle. They're critical about Eastern religion and so on. The parents are now really showing concern about the Western education value.
제 넘버가 지금 내 납쇼가 지금 다 다만 가리고 양 보고도 저 보여를 공부하는 자가더니 지 슬롭자 잔다 잠바야 하름가 거라 다 있나 양 대소 할레바가 더니 주점 종킨다는 더니 슬랍소대야나 슬랍소대 지 다른 거 거리 니진 그거는 그 슬랍소이다나 다양 지 그런 수 샘컴대야 잔다 다 렌저고요.
And then for the Western parents, I know some of the Western parents send their children to school in East, in Asia, and So when they send their children to the East, they also notice the children are changing their behavior. They're showing change in terms of how they communicate and relate to their immediate environment and so on. And some of this change, they're really welcomed by their parents.
실동 그 당상이나 되는 너쇼고 lokso도 잠mol은 그 lok소가 다 자반을 되는 거. 뒤는 거야 그 아메리카가 lok소도 되네 다 야급 망보지가 페스타다시고네. 옛날 치 남바가 지 쪽착가 다 나름 망보 정도와 롭tip거나. 다때나 되는 가소가 다리가 나 네 야나다는 디모고 롭tip거나 야 나가마 된다요 말에 다 너쇼고 락소고 지상의 간제 존에나 된 잠mol랑 점지 다래 식진도 되고요.
Then the Western education, especially the American education, it becomes almost like a root or the basis for many Asian countries. They especially use American education as a model for the education system in the East. So I've observed that they're importing a lot of the aspect of the Western education to the Eastern education as well. Like in the Western education, you play a lot of important discussion on animals and so on. And the Easterns are now really copying that too.
니나양 다리 네 너쇼고 tam 탁쇼랑lik 될거나 자가 만에 다리가 각동 랑lik 스타반도 있나 시적 근로함이 폐지가 타단 드네 맞수 그거 랑크를 먼저가 탁거가 샤박동주 리한다 할레바가 그거 가침보고 종데 따따 드네 슬로트소소나나 드네 따지 게르근이 나자가 드네 장가 수당스 있나 야라 gaba 지 지니 속동주 원디 스타와데 nga rangoni na tariga te haleba tene monserchego samgayo.
Among the Western education approach, one of them I'm really most amazed was the critical thinking, or sometimes just like a critiquing everything. Of course, like the critical thinking brings a lot of benefit for social improvement and social development. It's really important for a kind of general part of the education. But at the same time, this critical thinking and the critiquing, the attitude, also like what I'm a little bit puzzled was they become very critical about their teachers. The students, starting being very critical generally about their teachers. And these aspects are also, I'm a little bit puzzled.
옛날에 대랑 옛날에 저 삼기스가 전에 제남바 전에 로트라치고 길근다 말이 마오와나 체남비 갑쇼다나 전에 스치게야나 전에 잠몰라나 다리 식진도 그 야침보스 되고요래. 대인디다 전에 다리가 다주 loksun도가 남바대서 안된 결고나 결교 맞다. 옛날에 무슨 전에 점직식 그 거박동다 니모데 전에 거박 나르던 로나 점슨 요나 띠가 침보레 마토데면 당선 전에 로총 망보지가 전에 잔라 거박동제데 전에 거박 다 쇼리바 마토데면 고송거 전에 세르비용 나면 요사마레 대비전도는 지 르바가 샤디 결혼데 내리그 돈다 만탄지 뭐 그러다나 다마 수다리 소화가 조금 못선던 통건도.
So here many of you are teachers, researchers and students, and so I wanted to bring up this subject about the critiquing or the critical thinking. I think the critical thinking is a very powerful tool when it's followed by reasons, logics, and so on. Of course, it's very useful. I think what the critical thinking does to certain students, especially some Asian students, is without relying on the reasons and the logics and truth and so on. And they merely use that a way of denying or criticizing your own kind of culture and so on. And this really brings kind of the destructive side of the critical thinking. Especially these, I think, students or researchers, when they criticize the other's value, they do so without kind of being impartial, without it being grounded or well-researched. They merely kind of use that as a means to attack other values, and that I found a little bit kind of disturbing.
당연히라 점직시는다 시집건데 단 탁시랑을관도 근데 다 디럽 니시가 나와 근데 디럽 니시나 쇼는데 디럽 니시나 쇼는 건디 땅 아순 로아 먹어 근데 야 카쇼 뭐 저거 나바잔들 기르죠 그래 다 땅성 아주 데 워이르크 사차가 그거 존노도 소이나 다치 인지 kat 몽스 그 시기온 말에 다 그런 소리 야이 갈아간섬을 시고한데 되니 야이 갈아간섬을 시내나 다 직텔라 되니 그런거다 납쇼거도 따와가 또 남모이 그런거 다 지 그러나 추거 따와이나 안다가 조징거 따와이나 다 참마다 되니 거바 코낙던 거요래 옛날에는 거바 동지고 되니 내리다만 탐바 몽스다나 당어 되니 다 리페르샤데 그러나 되니 내리다만 탐바 몽스 그런 수제거요래.
And so for the 20th century, I think the education and especially the critical thinking is really important. We really need to pay attention how this impacts other cultures and so on. One thing I observed that many, or not many, some Tibetan youngsters who read the Western literature by Chinese medium, many of them even don't read the original work, but they read the selective works that are translated into Chinese. And then they use this kind of limited information to really criticize their cultures and values without backing up with the reasons and logic. And that I felt like one of the disadvantages of using this notion of critical thinking a very partial way.
ngātsū mī lōr jīga nāna sārtō kiāng mōngu sūtā tārī shiong yōng kōnzhē tē zhēn dōg nēlik dā mām tāmbā gā tō gār mōngdā kiāng mōngu sūtā tōrlōg shē kōnzhē tē ngē tē nā tākshō rāng lō kō kēpan rē sāng.
And one of the, of course, on top, there are advantages for critical thinking when you apply them properly. One of the, I think, immediate advantage of using the critical thinking is related to the level of the creativity and innovative. When you use the critical thinking properly, it also overcomes the, I think, issues and information that are not properly researched. And so using the critical thinking, it helps to the quality of the information. But of course, there are advantages for that.
당성 아수 네 오직그 그러나 출력이 난다가 전에 대추다나 전에 딱난 거 추다나 다 담아야 바가 지 탁천 거 추래 단도소 되라 전에 지 쇼소소 거 지, 거바 몽동 거지 티 거바도 지양 동거다나 배나 대추의 전바인지다나 대전도는 지 탁천 거 추데 다지 까마 있는 디모고네서 동거다나 요네나 때 ngātsū tēstāwī gāpa tōngjī tēlā ngōne gā chī tā gāpsūshī nā yōng chōkī rē tōg nēlī tāng tōmbā rē rē tā nā tā chī ngātsū wōjir nāng tāng gā tā rī gā lōzhōng gā gyāb zhōng yahwā zhō tā shī nā zhī yinī nā tā chī gāpa tōngjī tē tāng nā tē zhēn tā nā ngātsū tā rī gā tā xiāpā tōngjī tē yāng nā tā chū tī lōjī tā gyāb zhōng tā nā nyāng lēn tē tsō mā chī nī nā yāng dī zik tā rī kā lē yō rē.
Another, I think, observation that I had with the critical thinking and how it's used is they're using it improperly. These days in Tibet, people are very critical about Buddhism in general or religion in general, and they really kind of attack the pure vision dharmas, the Tangna, and they're attacking the Derche. And they also kind of question the validity of the Mahayana teaching. And if you really rely on correct reasons and logic and correct fact, and if you critique these, we really welcome, because this will really improve the quality of the teaching in general. But main problem is people who are critiquing these subjects have a very limited knowledge about the subject itself. They have a very limited knowledge about Buddhism and the Tantrayana and so on. And then just taking this huge challenge of critiquing that. And as a result, the quality of the critiquing itself become questionable.
네, 같은 아주 점지가 쳤어. 대 짐직대 다 돈당 몬턴 바지네나 tene jimjik sheba polayang namjik ne skabna kale mumbo yongre tene jimjik shenu trimje de yana tan roa mi ngaso sowa ga chote yana daga pamba ge chimbo zum jongkona haleti dari skabore ngama nga andi no shokum boron bazik tene ta shastum go boron bag shastum go yike ga na tenji anesar ko song chirezena ku so dari shastum go 이게 대 스타트로 돌제가 그 스탐거 그 아망문든 제근데 기대요네 다 쿠소도 다 테스토에 근데
so it's so obvious that as a researcher we have to look at the result or the benefit of one's research, right? And when you really conduct an improper research, the consequences is really bad. It will bring more questions. It will really kind of affect the actual value of your own work and your own view if you don't follow the proper procedure for research. And the result is also bring more harm than benefit. I remember talking to or reading a research thesis of a PhD work. The subject was the person is doing research on the Chanka rebel dodges, this experiential experiential song of the view on emptiness. That Chanka, who was the tutor to one of the Qing emperor, right? And so he was doing the research on this particular subject.
그 장자가 대 송디나나 측지요래 대체제 언제나 그
다따랑이 입로스가지 또 된저 소다라 신비 나와랑랑의 랑소르전에 결대라 진정 소르나 접저 아마 이제레데나 라라랑랑의 요스크는 그거 난극마 빅비샤시드마야 아마 감모데 쪼동고
티모디요래 다때다리 그거 점지기 있으면 다쿠 소미가나 다 차샤로로 돌진도 그 직동 등자 그거 접든 노래 근데 코 다리가 달로 던체가 왔다 다리가 지금 근데 콩고 디럽디 원더시나 근데 로총 가래가 근데 다 거기라 전데기도 파르칠 지가 다리가 다 르그다나 대전도는 지금 라 zola sobaga te garjega surgin gaji to the saida lochong cheka tene semchen mo do sok yo tene changja amati tariga ta te sema masong dana to ko zasang na ga za zanjang yong dana ta prochi ka ko zei dana ti ta tsig de tenje tarigam jend.
So I've noticed that the thesis in the thesis there's a very famous particular verse written by Chanka when he was expressing his experience of the emptiness. And I'm just phrase. Chanka was saying that these days many young scholars, when they really try to prove something by really neglecting the most important part of your the subject of the negation, and basically they're directing their research for the wrong reason and the wrong understanding. As a result, in the Changja said, mother, Ama, is like almost now going to run away. So, so the person explained this literally. And he said, these days, many young people are killing animals, abusing animals. The Changja's mother saw that and she was so shocked and she escaped. So they literally translate or they explain this word by word without really truly understanding what Changja is referring to.
다 시집거티 나온데 있나 테니 스통아 마임바가 스노아 뜻도 가지 다 거근도 아까때 다리 스통아 마임비 스노아 양거 와서도 거정네 있나 임 스통아니 아마르감모 그 자라탄 치키피 임 스통아니 때 다리 다 프로그램도 고되나 다때 랑어리로 제kin다 동거던거 다 스통아니 그 다리 돈샤는들다 옛나야 테니 점직반가리 된다된도 다때인디 그거 딱 맞추고 또 마온 있거나 아주 보진 않던 그 소바치 자데 강레데니나 드니 소 짐지고 그런 거 쳤더나 또 아주 다 능돈데라 드니 콜록스인데 손에나 드니 다 너쇼이나다 카쇼이나다 티 할레바가 그 종르겠을 거나 자가 드니 지 네서 무스라들의 상고요.
In reality, what Chankhya is referring to is he's talking about emptiness. Through entire subject was about emptiness. And he's saying these new practitioners were really busy at denying the appearances without really truly realizing how these appearances are formed, without really investigating the source of the appearances. This is the nature of the intrinsic nature and so on. They're so busy with really attacking the appearances without truly understanding how these appearances are formed. As a result, emptiness is becoming further from their mind stream. So that's what Chankhya is referring to. He wasn't referring to animals at all or matter. So that's how people easily misunderstand the concept of the teaching, especially the researchers, without really properly understanding the subject. And therefore, what I wanted to say here is when we engage in a research, we really need to know the subject well. We really have to become ourselves as experts on the subject. And unless if you really kind of do the research at a superficial level, it will bring loss to all of us. And also it will be such kind of a waste of time.
따따로 맞수 마오나 점직시나 소도 다리센데 대게진이 라소바가 송저가 남터 거거 다 가서 만디 유나 저자거 속자가나야 길근 가래가 드니 칸로마 드니 사람 칸로 드니 위잠 칸로가 남터 다리 점직시가 그 뜻대 yapbo 상도 드니 게진이 된잖아 가만 직면랑 바가 드니 랑남 다리가 드니 점직시 용데 다때 배 yap보래 대동 자와가 가수 드니 지금 탐문거 다 르니거 거다나 탐문거 베나 오마다나 사드마다나 몬바 드니 상응이나 상응 것도 쉬고 다 리지르드 거그 된자이나 다 점직시나 다리 할레바 yap보래.
And so as we talk about the research, I'm really impressed with the Jana Gyatso's approach to the Tibetan studies. And she done many years of research on Namtars. She did also research on Jingmi Limba's autobiography as well. And recently I went to Chicago, and another researcher done wonderful research on the Sera Kanto, the Wis Kanto. And this research, it seems more like a holistic approach, more kind of a comprehensive. And so that's something I think we really need to learn from Janet and these wonderful scholars. And I think it's a good idea that we engage in research on general subjects such as, the Uma, the Tibetan, or the Uma, the Buddhist kind of study on views, philosophical views, the logics, and Vajrayana, the Tantra. We can study them. That's no problem.
다 옛날에 때 맞소 보여 그 추구나나 근데 트이 맞췄 다 냠는 거 가려요. 단 데나 드니 다 점직시나 인치민치미가 다지 왕 토야다나 대전도나 첫 원던 로야 다 된자 마시나 그거 저 디스 다리 여보 말했삼지 응알아 대랑 다리 응알아 된자위 스타상 요 드니 양치 딱까망한데 후나 납쇼타가 때문에 길근가리게 되나 딱상한테 상제 요 말했네 그 상한가 때문에 종가리라 때는다나 타커 셔츠나 만직사메가 근데 보고 다리가 나추대 상고생데 대지 야보 말했지다나 된자 다리가 송근데 당이 그런 소라 때문에 냠스르게 섭되네 그러나 길근가리가 때문에 그런 거 출lực 스타와 있는 자가 대전도나 참는 그 고르모 간제 요니나 자가 로카세 요니나 다 대소다리가 상하고 근데가 당 아주 보여거 되네 냠는 그 척거 건데 소이나 딜리장 다리가 상하래네 된디 아주 추데라 판선다리 순족거 제대나 되네 상하가 가르야 요네 다 좀바 보고네나 텔라 사마야 제치는다 되네 갸갸갸지다나 다 담도 종에다나 디 거요데 대소이나 지 자접 마존나 다리가 되네 양지 마수다리 출력 런탕데 디스 냠조주 닌카요네.
And so when I look at how we should approach on researching Tibetan Buddhist teaching or the Buddhist teaching in general, I think if you wanted to engage more holistically, you really need to study this subject. When you engage in research on a particular subject, you really first really hear the teaching itself. There are many commentaries. You really read the commentaries, study the commentary, and within the commentary there are different level of commentaries. You have the general kind of commentaries, literal commentaries. Then you talk about the experiential commentaries, the mertier. And to receive some of this experiential commentary instruction, you have to receive empowerment. You have to really agree to observe certain commitment. These are a kind of a prerequisite for going into much deeper level of the study. And it would be really, I think, useful for the researchers to think about, studying them much more deeply, studying the commentaries, hearing the instructions, the pithy instructions from the real teacher. And this will bring your research much better quality. And unless if you just do at artificial level, I think your result also would be a little bit artificial. That's my view. Recently I heard while I'm touring United States, some researchers questioning about why should we keep Vajrayana as a secret teaching. We really need to reveal this, and we need to remove this secret from the coding, because the only way you can study it properly would be by removing this secrecy. And I had really some doubt and question over this view. This is because engaging in this very kind of authentic teaching, there are certain commitments, both from the researcher point of view as well as from the other people, need to be observed. Because when you read at the end of the commentaries and these pithy instructions in the Vajrayana teaching, the writers request confidential. At the Samaya, you do not show these people who do not receive commitment. These are the requests from the authors, and that's what we have to observe. Keeping secrecy is important for even personal reasons. In the West, we do not share our salaries. We do not, easily tell how old we are. There are certain kind of minimum privacy that we all strive for. Likewise, the Tibetan Buddhism, especially Vajrayana, need to have this minimum privacy too. And if we do not observe that and expose this to anyone, then it will bring more harm than benefit for research result.
실등거 당아수 보박 사차양 때래. 근데 스토케 와서는 냠림바. 근데 다 샤파통네 스토케 와서는 냠림바니까 스타바된 남인다. 동시작해요. 냠림바데 코너도 딱낭다는 근데 지 이치 코나 근고 조금. 근데 스토케 와서가 잔텔라타리 꾼주지다는 근데 지 다 텔라타리 저 거박통지다는 근데 다 타르완 핑지 근데 단자만다 근데 제 넘버 보고 추구나나 있나 대지 카그나라니 오래더니 똑개와서 그런 gendan가야는 바로라 가바통지 소외에 냠렘바가 그 랑가 냠렘바 소외이다나 다티 똑개와티 솔라 페다리 짜데 페다리 그 코랑순 다 넷다왔선데.
And even within the Tibetan Buddhist followers, there is a constant contradiction and a disagreement between the Tokewa, the debaters, or people who kind of only engage in debating, versus people who are engaging in serious practices. So there's a kind of a disagreement between the debaters and the practitioners. The first one only kind of interested in critiquing others, really try to critiquing others' interpretation, whereas the practitioners are more interested in the experience, the result, the realization. So this kind of disagreement is also obvious within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition.
당가 스타트르가 근데 출력되라 점직시대당 이버거 출력들이 잡종시기다나. 근데 추딘 롤릭되라 다리 순적시기도 같이 보래. 그러나 예실 출력금 개발속에서는 공거 추되라 다 점직시네 zonte 인치민치민가 하대 다리 켈린고 아담 개발 모습 그때서도 근데 코랑수다 하대 그런 직된 쉐바포스원을 티케 말라나 다지 코랑수 추되라 런탄제 온 말에 점직시기 자 존더요 말에 되는데.
And in my view, when we engage in the religious research activities, we really need to understand the background of the religion or the subject itself well, and we also need to understand the system of that particular knowledge through that tradition. And when you understand the system, the background well, then naturally you will pay more respect to the subject. I heard among the Christian or the scholars who are researching on Christianity, and they say one of the prerequisites of that research is the person at least to show respect to the Creator, or they accept the Creator. And when you do that, then the person would show a genuine respect to the topic and the subject, and then they will engage in the research much more kind of holistically. And I'm asking the same thing for the Tibetan Dharma researchers or scholars.
아주 네 그러나 같이 줄응저든 정말 다양 때지 질 양반을 송어래. 제레데나 그런 거 굴란진데 굴란도 그러나 레가 니바단 레가 그바가나 나랑 그 추데라다네 지 록타다나 딱 높아시 찍고 데라다리 같이 상쾌요나 못데다리 다 마르사 적나요. 대 추담 탐바연제이다나다 그런 수준 거 같나요. 무슨 자로 송어래. 또 임비견 선거 당선 잠모는 거 못함저거 다 같이 그 줄라 다르게 점직시에나 콜라 포등 조지오고 또 측단을 좀 입적고 말해.
Among the Islamic studies, I think the Quran mentioned in the 2nd and the 9th chapter that people who are critiquing or criticizing the Quran or the Islamic teaching, and especially, they do so without showing any respect, then it's the duty of the followers to really defend your teaching. It's mentioned clearly in the Quran.
그러나 다리 야그러와는 있나요? 그런 거 다리가 출입 거다 야그르디 지네 zonte 때 그거 야그러와가 추바인 다 대마연 바가 그 추바 잠바 지금 나초라 다리가 턴나 말해세 되니 다지 야그르 그 추가 점주 쏘고대요나 다 야그러와 코로마 보자면 잠바가 머르다나 잠바가 뭐소 다리가 되니 다 가스 다리가 셰코는 말이 된지 스토리온지.
Then among the Hindu studies, the scholars, the Indians really pay a lot of attention on their subject. So the Indian scholars themselves pay a lot of attention to what others read about the Indian topic. And when there are some kind of mispresentation of the information, they immediately defend and attack and critique. I forgot one last sentence from the previous discussion. Because of that, in the Quran teaching, the chapter 2nd 9 talks about defending and attacking the infidels, people who doesn't follow. It created this kind of atmosphere where less people, less non-Islamic scholars study about Islam. Because in the Quran it says it's the responsibilities of the followers to defend the teaching. So that's one extreme example. And then I talk about among the Indians, the Indian scholars to really defend their subject well.
나가서 보바가 다리 뭐몽보즈 소몽보즈도 야그르나 송어데 레타나 가서 보바가 그 출릭데 야그르와라야 그 반선제 답고요 말에 야그르와가 출릭데 가서 보발라야 니 용시에 막도되면은 그시가 다리가 제가 온 말에 그 그런 스토리jen데.
And so we know many Tibetans now live in India, and they have constant, almost like a contact with the Indian people. But there's very little exchange in terms of studies. Not many Indians study about Tibetan Buddhism. Not many Tibetans, really pay attention on the non-Buddhist traditions in India. It seems like the contact is very limited.
다 당선 그 롭천 그 로만 가리가 다 줄이 그 다그 쏨지나 발칠 베나 가제 줄이 그 박사단 말아 박사는 말에다 다 대지 발칠 박사나 되니 니바요사 마크제용 사례 되니 야그르 줄이 와고 되니 적샤다 아니면 적막선에다 다대 적샤 산나라는 촉사야 그 적샤 존나 촉사야 그 체리드나 짐슨 송시즈 이다나 당상 다리가 다 짐직 받소이나 잠자제 오늘다 옛날에 출리가 소르긴데 가서 상마가 다 텔라다리가 다 subscription.
So these days, some of the graduate students in Tibet, they're writing about Islamic traditions, the Indian or Hindu traditions. And they say, oh, among the Islamic traditions, one do not consume pork. Some people say, oh, you can consume pork in certain regions. And then other Tibetans who read about the Hindu religion, they only mention about the Hindu followers not consuming buffalo meat. And that's pretty much what they discuss.
당아서 회나 나와 상기비 출리들라야 그런 거 다리 소르겐다는 그런 거야 따와 모지고 건데 다 따와 모지고나 다 텔라야 때네 지금 마오하나 때네 쇼소소고 슬롭자 침모다나 게르겐이나다 슬롬마이나다 다 짐지 시원에 급나 데 초랑 추 공르거 때네 야종다나 추 그런 거 로기다나 추 그런 거 때네 다티 추근 난동거 된데 소다리 고기다 사로즈다 되네 시기다 할레바 가르침보레.
So for the Buddhist scholars, I just wanted to emphasize again, it's very important to truly try to understand the tradition well, and including the view of that teaching, and both the scholars and students really paying attention to the background, both religious and cultural background of the subject, the historical background and so on. And paying more attention in this area would really help to improve the research. And then I go back to one sentence when Kempa talked about the people writing on Hindu teachings. I mean, more and more people are showing respect to other religions, like we understand the Hindus do not consume buffalo meat, the Muslims do not consume pork, and so people respect to these teachings, right? Likewise, we also need to show respect to the unique traditions of the Buddhism too.
딱 접주다리 쓰르진다나 나입간다 그 랑샤인 마토제마 나 존던데 초 게르긴 침보리지이다 다 기박을 거고 그 렌지오 መን제이다나 다다리 까가 낙사로즈도 샤지온.
And for the researchers, I think it's fun that we analyze, we study Buddhism. This is because the Buddha himself mentioned about the monks and scholars. Please examine my teaching like you would examine a piece of gold. I want you to examine it and then practice it. I just do not want kind of a mere respect to the teaching. So Buddha gave us this kind of permission to examine, and we are doing the right thing. We're following that teaching, that's sure.
Tene 지금 뭔가 개발도 것도 되어는 이돈 논을 람 계장 냠뇽 전기 남주를 셔당 공박지던 배우지 tene 다 니바 돈기 롱당 리발람 케바 tene 랑랑라 냠뇽요나 테스타빈 케바디 tene 직등게 시샤 강당 강다나라나 tene 랑라양 판바요나다 장라양 판바요나 tene 타득 땅아 속어 tene 지금 냠렌 시내나 tene 지 참마도 공바티 좀 가라면나 제만나 다지 참마데 가라다 참마데 스나와 잘랑소나 tene 랑양 시포였나 말에 tene 잠보랑 때라요나 다 시지 여화다린 적도나 말에 대내나 마수 소종 시비 게름 거 초진난자 짐직 시비 게름 거 초인난자 tene 다 길그 요도 좀 탐칠라 판바줄게 양랑 아춘 조아 못 참말라 tene 깊은 거 챘다나 tene 다 소종 시지원도 나랑 거 따스르건 거니나 할레바다리 같침보레 상가요.
So I think when we engage in research studies, when we study in general, it's very important that we cultivate the right intention. I think the right intention is really to bring benefit to the humanity. Through your research, try to bring some direct benefit to yourself if you can practice what you research, and the teaching as a result of that experience to others. And then that will really bring I think, benefit out of your research. And as mentioned by a Tibetan teacher, that when you engage in study of dharmas, you really have to study both the relative and the definitive meaning of the teaching, and then you experience it by practicing, putting this teaching in practices. And once you really earned the experience, and then if you preach or teach this to others, it wouldn't really create any conflict. It would only bring benefit. This is, I think, maybe correct way of approaching how we really study Buddhism. Otherwise, if you only use the lens of critical thinking and try to study the teaching, you constantly would find contradictions among the teaching and between the teachings. And that creates more problem rather than solution to the humanity. So the above discussion was about how you engage in the study Tibetan Buddhism. And then finally, I wanted to conclude, going back to the original topic, how we can generate calm and peace in this kind of conflict world. My kind of advice is that we really need to engage in more inner qualities, studying your own kind of a mind, and try to engage in paying less attention to superficial things, but really try to be your own master. The secret to really calm mind is try to control your mind. Buddha Shakyamuni said, you are your own master. Likewise, if we really engage with this kind of attitude in sharpening our mind, then I think we will gradually improve our mental mind kind of strength and to bring more sustainable, calm and peaceful mind. So I wanted to basically conclude here. We have a question and answer time later, so if you have any questions about these, or if you disagree to some of the discussion that I initiated, we can discuss them during the question and answer session. Thank you.